MS Now national reporter Rosa Flores, who's in Austin, Texas at Tallarico campaign headquarters. Rosa, tell us what you know. What's the vibe in the building? We can hear the music in the background.
Simone, the party has started. The doors are open. People are starting to come in. We're expecting for Tallarico to take the stage within the hour. We don't know the exact time. We don't know exactly what he's going to say, but this is a victory speech. And we know that the goal is very clear. He plans to make history in November. That is the goal. He plans to do what no other Democrat has done in the state of Texas for decades, since 1994, and that is win a statewide seat. His goal is to flip the red U.S. Senate seat to a blue seat. We don't know exactly what he's going to be saying, but there's a few things, Simone, that I'm going to be looking for. First of all, if we hear him hint at anything, how he plans to unite Texas Democrats and the Texas Democratic Party. There's been a lot of division leading up to the primary race. As you know, a good swath of black Democrats in Texas supported Jasmine Crockett. She's calling for all of her supporters to support Tallarico. But what will he say? Will he have words that help win over those voters? I'm also going to be looking for any hint at his strategy going forward. As you know, he's been very much the love thy neighbor type of strategy. But like it or not, he will, or he is now that he is the nominee, he will be the face of the Trump opposition in the state of Texas. Will he change his strategy? I'm going to be looking for hints of that. And then finally, I'm going to be looking to see if he hints at how he plans to handle his GOP rivals, Cornyn and Paxton. Will he be attacking both of them? Will he focus on one or the other? I don't know, but I'm going to be looking for all of that. And Simone, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be holding the fort, and I will report back.
I'm just so happy finally they moved my girl inside. She was outside all day yesterday. Hope you were enjoying the comfort of the indoors.
You've been doing an amazing job avoiding the party, just standing there professionally and not getting the, Rosa Flores, thank you so much for being with us. Now let's turn to Democratic strategist Sawyer Hackett. Welcome, Sawyer. Hey, you heard Rosa's reporting. There's a lot of excitement and a lot of anticipation, but also some questions about how this is going to play out. You're advising, the campaign and have been involved in this process. How do you see this victory? How do you see the setup going into this general/primary election for Republicans? And what's the play here? Because it's exciting. Texas is playing out exactly as I predicted it would 20 years ago. That's all I'm going to say. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and I think we've all had those predictions over many years. I think Texas has become a bit of a boy who cried wolf state, where every cycle we get voters whipped up about Texas turning blue, and when it doesn't happen, I think people feel deflated. But I think this time around we're really looking at potentially a perfect storm that might kind of align right in James Tallarico's favor. Democrats are waking up, I think, this morning with a pep in their step. We saw record-breaking turnout on the Democratic side. We see a Republican Party that is extremely divided and unhappy. Both of these candidates, both James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett, both getting over 1 million votes. Even Jasmine Crockett, who ultimately lost, received more votes than either of the Republican candidates in the GOP primary. At the same time, you have Donald Trump really driving this wedge in the Republican Party. You have a 4-term senator from Texas, John Cornyn, who's unpopular in the state. He's unpopular in the MAGA movement. And you have Ken Paxton, who is this, indicted, Republican impeached, kind of scandal-ridden candidate who is turning voters off with a very extreme Republican ideology. I think it really does kind of play right into James Tallarico's favor as somebody who I think has kind of campaigned with an approach that reaches a broad coalition of voters, a big intent approach, while also not really sacrificing on policy, on progressive policy. He's somebody who's both energizing the base and I think expanding the tent. It really is a perfect storm, I think, for both, the Democratic side with the level of enthusiasm we're seeing and Republicans being extremely divided in this moment. It's kind of playing right into Democrats' favor.
Well, meanwhile, Simone, the elephant in the room, of course, is Donald Trump and who it is that he is expected to endorse in the Republican runoff. The Atlantic reporting that he's expected to endorse Cornyn. They estimate the added cost of Paxton being in the nominee in the general election range from $80 million to more than $200 million. That's according to several top strategists, given the Democrats' ability to raise massive sums of money in the state from individual donors if the race is perceived as winnable. Do you think that tips Trump's thinking?
Well, look, I think to be very clear, the voters in Texas get to decide who their nominee is. And the fact that the president of the United States, he's allowed to endorse whoever he wants, to be honest. But he is choosing, to a point that Michael Steele has made last night and throughout the day today, he chose not to endorse in the initial primary race where it could have mattered. And now he wants to tell the voters of Texas, this is who I want. The other guy got to get out. And y'all are just going to take my person. That's voter suppression if I ever heard of it, child. And so I know people thought that the tactics and the suppression tactics of this administration and this president were going to be relegated solely to Democrats and Democratic voters. But he doesn't care about anyone's autonomy, it seems, to be able to make their voice heard in a democracy, Sawyer. But I also think it's notable that his endorsement doesn't necessarily mean a win. This from the Texas Tribune about many of the candidates that he endorsed won their races on Tuesday. Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller was poised to lose re-election. 3 candidates for Congress, Trump-endorsed candidates, were headed for runoffs, one of them in a distant second place. So maybe Trump is helpful, Sawyer, maybe he's not. But at the end of the day, don't Texas voters have to make their own decision?
Yeah, it's pretty funny because on the Democratic side, we have all of these kind of debates inside the party about whether the DNC is kind of putting their finger on the scale for establishment candidates and whether insurgent candidates can compete. And then you have on the Republican side, the president just kind of inserting himself after the race has already gone to a runoff, saying, I'm going to pick the nominee and the other guy's going to get out of this race. It's incredible, the level of hypocrisy coming out of the Republican side in Texas. I also agree that Donald Trump's endorsement, doesn't carry as much weight as it used to. It definitely doesn't carry as much weight in a general election. And I think, what we saw yesterday in terms of the turnout on the Democratic side versus the Republican side, the enthusiasm gap between the Democrats and the Republicans, I don't necessarily think that even if he makes an endorsement of John Cornyn, that necessarily means that James Tallarico still can't win this race. I think obviously he would prefer Ken Paxton, just given the level of scandal and his record in the state. But I think John Cornyn doesn't necessarily drive voters to the polls. He's not a turnout machine. Doesn't have a record of accomplishments that I think Texas voters can point to. So I don't necessarily think Trump's endorsement means much in Texas. And frankly, the more he inserts himself into this Texas Senate race, the more James Tallarico benefits.